Oh.
Yeah, great idea.
Okay.
Yeah, it's
Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Yeah.
Okay. But THEC was actually the leader of the physical facilities survey, and it started at least in the 70s. Might even been in the 60s, but in the 70s it was going. And what they did was every 4 years there was a tour of every campus of every building, and I went on 2 of those, and the representatives were somebody from the state architect's office. And for 2 of the tours, that was me. And it was somebody from UT, and that was Clayton Deacle, who was the first state architect and moved on to be the facilities guy at UT. Dick Shellhart for the Board of Regents, and Brenda Albright for THEC. And it was run as a pretty structured thing. The form itself was all paper. And I believe it was 13 pages, and then sometimes they put on a cover sheet, a note sheet. And so it's 13 to 16 pages per building. So if you had 100 buildings, that's 1,500 sheets of paper. And each one of the 5, including the campus, needed a copy. So there was a lot of paper. When we went to a campus, there were boxes of paper. And so it was a pretty klutzy process. So that went on, and finally at the attempt in 95, I believe it was, failed. Just couldn't put enough emphasis and enough people together to get it going in 95. And TBR thought we needed to be doing something. So we kind of started looking at what we could do. Got Mike Fitz involved, who was then the state architect, and he got interested in it and actually made a building commission project out of it. We selected a designer, which was David Johnson Crabtree, and started looking at what we could do. Eventually, he brought on a high-powered consultant from Atlanta, with higher education facilities guy, Matt
Sizemore?
No, he was a high end guy.
Okay.
March Adams. But anyway, we were looking for a facilities survey, and what we could, a package. What we could find at that time were add-on packages from a major real estate package. So if you had a bunch of shopping centers or a bunch of office buildings, then as a module on that, there was a facilities, but you couldn't run it by itself. So we finally figured out there really wasn't anything out there at the time. So Match Adams said, what you really ought to do is base it on the CSI uniformat. And being a long-term CSI guy, I said, wow, that's great. We can do that. And the 3 or 4 of the community colleges had somebody come in and do a facility survey. And although they were different firms, the general format was there was a system description, there was recommendations and comments, and then there was some sort of a rating system for each of the systems. So said, that's probably as good as we can do. So Match put together a binder, which was a combination of Microsoft Word and Excel in a binder. And so the text was Word and the rating then was Excel. And in concept, it was a good idea. It was hard to operate. So I finally said, look, I can do all of that in Excel. So that's what I did. But this was about 2001. This had taken probably 2 years to get to this point. And Mike was involved. What later became Stream was involved. UT was there, but they were not particularly interested. And there were some other random people, and I can't remember. So about we got that all put together, and what I did then was go ahead and put each of the systems in a tab, an Excel workbook, and it rolled up to a summary sheet and said, lacking anything else, that's what we're going to use. So we were the only one, TBR was the only one that actually went forward with anything. Some of the departments thought they were going to, but I don't think anything happened. And UT didn't have any particular interest at that time. So we went forward. It got put together in like 2002 was when the survey, the survey started. So, and it was about that time that, Alan was sort of working along. And so the survey portion is simply it looks very much like Excel. It's the same, essentially the same format, the same look as Excel. And it's got the three components. It's got a system description, then a comments and recommendations, and then ratings. So it was about this time that was probably 2004, 2005, sometime that TBR was going to shut down their mainframe. And the facilities inventory ran on a DEC mainframe. And so everybody said, wow, what are we going to do? And so we started looking for something to take our inventory, something to handle what the mainframe was doing. And so we were looking around. We didn't find much at that point at all, particularly not, there were several universities that had some system, but it was generally spreadsheets. Vanderbilt had a pretty good system at the time. So, and I can't remember what that was, but we looked at that. So we wrote RFP largely based on the capabilities that the Vanderbilt system had at the time. We assumed that we might get whatever Vanderbilt had at the time. But actually it came in as Arquebus. And it was interesting because Memphis, just prior to that, had gone through a whole gymnastics to look for an inventory system, and they ended up with Arquebus. So we had Memphis and TBR both running on Arquebus. We dumped everything out of the old COBOL mainframe system, all the data into Arquebus. We tried to write some of the routines and checks into Arquebus, but that was a real challenge. What we had done at the time was our license extended to anybody in the TBR system that wanted to use Arquebus. And Arquebus was sort of the key. But Arquebus is a pretty heavy-duty program, and so getting the community colleges and even some of the universities to log on and try to understand Arquebus was a real challenge. So we kind of realized that was too big a handle, and there was no logical way for us to incorporate the survey into the Arquebus database. It could be done, but it was another sort of major challenge. So we kind of backed off of all of that and said, wait a minute, we at TBR really didn't need all of the capabilities of Arquebus. it suited, it really suited at the campus level because there was a lot that they could do with it. And then, but at TBR, we did not. So and this was probably 2011, 2010, 2011. By 2012, we had totally converted from Archibus over to an inventory system that's pretty much what we have now. And that allowed us to combine the survey and the inventory. You know, it's all dealing with buildings. One of them is how big the building is, and the other one is what condition of the system's in. So that's kind of how we got there. And again, what we're looking at now is based on what came with the start of it was the old COBOL system running in a mainframe, and then the organization and sort of structure of the PFIS now is quite a bit based on the logic and the structure of Archibus. So, and again, by that time, MTSU decided they liked Archibus, and so they got it. TSU and ETSU bought some modules of Archibus, but they never got it up and running. But the objective then was to let the campuses run Archibus if they wanted to do that, and to be able to extract out the data and bring it into our PFIS database. So that's kind of a quick overview. A lot of words, but all right. Any questions, comments? Whatever we're doing is a whole lot better than the THEC system of the 70s and 80s, which was all based on paper.
Right. Hey, Carl, I've got a question. In regards to what Vanderbilt was using, and you had referenced to that, and then it kind of grew out of that, you guys went with Archibus. I think what they're using now is a hybrid of ArcGIS with some other access database or some kind of database reference system there. Do you know if that was what they were using back then?
No. It was a package. And in fact, I think Crayon, you remember Crayon was one of the authors of the higher education book.
Mm-hmm.
He was some way hooked to whatever Vanderbilt was using at that time.
Oh, well, it might be AIM then, and AssetWorks. Because everything.
No, it was before that.
Oh, was it? Okay.
Yeah, and I think we may have got it. It was a system, I think, that was based on mainframes, because they were just bringing it out. At that point, they were bringing it away from a mainframe into the mini computer with terminals.
Was it Insight, Carl?
It was Insight. It was. I think it was. It was a predecessor of Insight.
Well, it's that part of that whole higher ed program that Creon wrote, and they still have up and running, I do believe.
Yeah, that's it.
It might be worth just, looking at it, being in touch.
Yeah.
Not to necessarily acquire it, but just to kind of see the structure of the information that they gather, since he is like one of the same as the, whole FICA manual as well.
Yep. And we had talked to him quite a bit just because of the Vanderbilt connection.
Right.
So, all right, what else? We ready to go into the PITS? I'm sorry, PFIS.
Let's do it.
Okay. Of course, the universities are still in there. they have, I think Allen has taken out some of the elements, but anyway, pretty much all of what used to be TBR is here. And when you first log in, when I was there, I could either pick out selected universities or selected community colleges, or all the universities, all the community colleges, or all the TCATs. There was a lot more sort of operational flexibility on the when I was there. What you can do now is only pick one campus. So we can pick a campus. We pick Dyersburg, and we go to data entry.
Carl, before you move away from that topic, are you saying that you can't do that anymore, or are you saying you don't have access
The
to
guest users can't do that. I assume all of that capability exists. There is one screen that's not here, and that is the institution screen. And it is it's just a high level of the institution and some names and phone numbers, and that's all part of the database.
See, I don't remember seeing that, and I had an institutional password.
It might have been something that only TBR had, because I think we decided, because I think that's where enrollment is entered. Enrollment used to be entered separately by Allen. Allen did enter directly in a table, and then he expanded the I think the initial to be able to put enrollment for anybody at TBR with the maximum access level to put in enrollment, as well as change the people. And so there is a higher level screen that's institution, with institution data in it.
Okay, yeah, we definitely need to see that and see what the status is. That'll be a conversation with Alan to verify that. Okay. So would Alan get the institutional data that was sent to TBR, the TBR folks, institutional advancement folks or research folks, and he'd get it there internally?
Well, you mean enrollment?
Right.
Yes. Enrollment came from institutional research at TBR, and they were pretty fastidious about getting of the information. And so we had head count and FTE for the institution, and then head count and FTE for each of the satellite campuses that had, at our cutoff point, was like 50 people. There was several of the community colleges, they're teaching in a high school or the community center, and they've got 3 students or 12 students or some number. We did not.
And so they did it by, they did it by campus code and not just even those large categories. There's more of a breakdown on the campus satellite numbers, and that's what you were talking about the other day.
Yes.
And that's what THEC is not doing. So we need to find that and verify where THEC is on the campus site locations, and verify that we're able to begin to conduct that function on a main campus and satellite campus basis. So you're saying it's mostly there. We just need to verify that capability.
See, TBR did it religiously, and then you remember Lily Shue?
Yeah.
Lily and George Malo hawked that stuff, and they did a lot of back checking, and of course they could actually pull up the course and do a count from the course file, and so the reliability was good at TBR. So
we would have to get to that level of review and data entry in order to duplicate the accuracy, I do believe.
And looking right here, you see Dyersburg, and I guess, can everybody
Right.
see my screen?
Yes,
Yes.
we can.
Okay. So we've got, there's Gibson main campus in Navy, and you see the little AA. That is the THEC site code. Those are the official
Okay.
THEC site codes, unless they have changed. And so we would structure the PFI and also enrollment based on the THEC site code. Now, Dyersburg taught at some other locations, and everything else that they had was well below 50. 50 was sort of an arbitrary number of 50 students, and it didn't really make any difference whether it was head count or FTE, because it was usually like 12 or 9 or 13 or 140. I mean, we just didn't have much in the 50 category, so it was pretty clean. So the hierarchy, and this really came from Archibus. It's system, then it's campus, then it's individual, it's institution, then individual campus, and you click on main campus, and there's all the buildings in the main campus. And you pick any building and you click on that, and there's floors. And you click on the floor, and you get all the rooms that are in that floor. And all of this is really right straight out of Archibus, and it seemed to work. It's logical, it's easy to manage, and so we just said that's what we're going to use. We picked it up. Alan has done some.
Carl,
Yes.
which did you log in using that PFIS guest and
Yes.
key to enter?
Key to enter.
You did. Okay.
Yes.
So I was looking at this going, I haven't been able to see it that way. And so I'm not navigating. I haven't learned the navigation yet. Okay. You answered my question.
Okay. And there's some, Alan did some, and I think he picked up some out of whatever the software program is. But this is, you can grab these things and move them around. So if you want to squeeze these down and get more in the data field, you can do that. When you're in the edit mode, if you have edit, what you can do is click on that room number, the room number, and you can edit that field. When you're up in the building, main campus. I'm in the main campus. When we're here, you can click on that building ID and you can edit anything that's in the building ID. And this one looks like it's pretty well filled out. Got a bunch of notes in it. He does have here, we went to great lengths to put in Patty has heard me rail about this. We went to great lengths to put in the risk management ID. That is the official, that's the 370 is the division, and that's the number within the division. So we went to some pretty good effort and beat on the campuses to make sure that they got the risk management ID in there, the contents value, and the replacement cost. When risk management redid their system, I kept saying, what you need to do is to put a field in there and use the campus ID, because that's a stable identification number and we can replicate it. They did not do that. And worse yet, they changed the way that they ID all their buildings, and there is no crosswalk table. So we're just kind of out in the blue. But here is the calculated replacement cost is based on what what Paul was working on is the cost per square foot times the gross square foot. This replacement cost is an inner number, and sometimes you'll see this number different than this number. Sometimes it's because they haven't updated it, but more often they think that building is not worth the amount, or it's worth more. In this case, the year built was 1969. It was occupied in 1969. The reason there are two fields there is that we have bought a number of buildings from, various sources. And so the building might be a 1985 building, but we didn't buy it till 2000. So that's why that is. And ownership, we have several levels of ownership, including the non-formula spaces. So the primary function is administration building. It is a classroom building. The use code is 10. Last renovation was 21,000 square foot. Cost $1.4 million. It was done in 2006. That's all subjective. Those is, what you consider a renovation. A lot of what we're doing now is we'll fix up 1 or 2 labs one year and a couple of more labs the next year, and then they do the restroom. So this is one of my issues, is that renovations, this was what we came up with at the time. I don't think it's a real good way. In any case, the last renovation was in 2006, and so that would be, so they get their they still get their markup in 2000 until 2026. Is that right? It's 20 years, Patty.
Right.
100% in service. A lot of this has to do with bringing buildings online or taking buildings offline. What it used to be was they wanted the dates. What date are you coming online with the new building? Well, we're trying to guess maybe a year and a half ahead, and the dates didn't mean much. So after a lot of discussion, everybody finally agreed that just the in-service percentage. So the buildings that are online, they're all 100%. There's gross square foot. That's the outside measurement. That's the total of the building footprint. And then we've got the address. And in the front end database, we have a mailing address and a physical address. So some campuses have box numbers or a mailing address that's different than their physical address. Anyway, at this level, if we had edit rights, what we could do is click on any building here and edit it. And the reason these are spread out is there's a lot of notes. And it just, the way it displays on the screen is that these are pretty much set width, and so it just wraps the text. So if you don't have notes, all of these buildings look like they have notes. So then we've got that the campus addresses the building, then the building addresses the floor, and the floor addresses the room. So we're at a room now, and they don't have many. They've identified the president's office, 391 square feet. The occupant, some campuses have put some occupants in there. Some campuses have done a pretty good job of putting the stations. This should be the total count. Even for a conference room, if the conference room is for like 12, we ought to see 12 stations for a conference room, although we know there's not 12 people in there at all times. office. Typically, an office has the president's office, and 391 square foot probably has a little conference area. But since this one isn't assigned, the stations would just be one. There's no research. None of that is revenue producing. There are several types of revenue producing because the bond fund questionnaire definition of revenue producing is different than what one might expect. So we have various codes in there for revenue producing. Room use code. Actually, this is just a office is a 310, and then this is a support area or something. It's a 315, so it's support for that office. The room subuse. That's where, Patty, we talked about having, a room use code of 310 and 311 and 312. And I think that's what Georgia has done. It's what other people have done. What that does is make it a little harder to sort all of the offices together. And so one option, or the option that we elected, was to try to do, if it was important, we would do a room subuse code. And what we did was break it down by the different categories that are in the THEC space guidelines. So that room use code, again, that may be too finite. I mean, that may be too many divisions. And the CIP code, they do have some in there, and that is for it's 700 to 700. But anyway, they've got a few CIP codes, but this is the administration building, so you wouldn't expect many to be in there. Going on across, they don't have any of the taxonomy in there. They do have program type. Program type is a holdover from the old COBOL coding. TBR used to do a lot based on the program type, and it is somewhere between the room use code and a taxonomy. And it's a pretty good tool. We may want to look at that a little bit more.
Is that the one you thought that we may consider eliminating it?
We need to decide. Everybody has done it. It's a pretty simple thing, but we need to look back and see if we want to try to do it almost gets back to division and department. You need to look carefully at the program types, Patty, and
Okay.
And see if we need that. Again, I think everybody has got it in there, and we don't have division and department. So this would be like a College of Arts and Science, and then the department would be chemistry, or Division of Arts and Science, and the department would be biology.
So for the institutions to have their own internal reporting that begins to do what Archibus does in terms of the reports, they must fill in the division and department and would not necessarily be doing any sorts on the program type. They would be using division and department, right? But right now, there's no report that you can, or let me turn this into a question. Can you do reports based on divisions and departments now out of this program?
We were doing so many different reports at TBR that we decided that we would just do the reports in Excel. And so there's not a lot of reports written, but yes, we used to do. And again, this is based on, Patty, do you remember the cost study?
Right.
The program type was a very important component in the cost study. And for for those that are confused about cost study, what the cost study did was look at how much it cost per student per department, and it was really pretty much program type. But it was a lot of work because it included the faculty cost as well as facilities cost,
Yikes.
incidental cost, administrative cost was proportioned. So
that was a number nobody wanted to look at.
that it was, because it would tell you that a chemistry major costs $20,000 a semester, and you're only charging $3,000 for tuition. So and of course the money makers were the English and math.
Right.
So little by little, and I think kind of the demise was when they started phasing out the mainframe.
Right.
And there was no logical way to get all of those costs put together. And even if the campus gave us costs, they couldn't validate it. But the institutional research at TBR could. They could go back and look at the course schedule and enrollment and all of that other, and salaries and everything else, and validate that the numbers that were given were appropriate. So
Yeah.
So Patty, lacking full division and department program type may be something we'd want to look at. Agency.
You're saying to keep.
Well, it's there. I mean, no use getting rid of it now, even if we think that if we don't have a good use for it right now, I would say let's not get rid of it. Agency code may be one that we can. What that is when TTU was teaching classes at various community colleges. And so what this was to acknowledge some other agency operating in space in a campus. And there was quite a bit of that, surprising amount. Agency code also included when a university gave the post office some space, or when it actually gave some space to an Army recruiter, or it was any outside agency, particularly geared towards shared use of higher education. Again, TTU keep teaching classes at community colleges. And in some cases, we had community colleges teaching classes at universities, but universities didn't like that, because what the community college wanted to teach was math and English, and those were the profit centers for the university. So they didn't like that very well. Let's see. So that was agency code. If that was used before and they relied on it quite a bit, I don't think we have used it. Furnishings type and technology type are two that, again, what we were trying to get at there was it a tablet arm, or was it a seminar type, or had we gone to some other learning format? Did it have fixed seats? And technology was there anything there? Was it set up pretty much as a lecture with a projector and a computer, or did we have computer workstations? So we were trying to get our Chancellor Manning used to come in occasionally and say, how many 21st century classrooms or computer-based classrooms do we have in the TBR system? And we had no idea. So we called.
Carl, are there codes associated with that technology type? I mean, different categories that are numbered?
There are some recommendations that we came up with in like 2012.
Okay, so that could be the category that we might use to evaluate a breakdown of interactive learning, maybe. Yes. Okay.
And this was 2012, so I don't think interactive learning was one of the types, but yes, there are types. And again, it was said preliminary, and when you say preliminary, very few people filled it out. There are some people that actually did that. And then there was notes. We had a notes column and institutional notes 1, institutional notes 2, and TBR notes. And there is, we're in building. In building, there's also some notes, but in the building, there are Schedule D notes. There are notes. Patty, if you'll look on that thing I sent you last night, the data entry, there's a Schedule D notes. And so you can put notes in there and they print in the notes column in Schedule D. Okay. So the whole logic is, and so Gibson County is THEC code AA. There's just one building there. It's one floor and it's got not a lot of rooms. And sometimes there's an ITV room and a biology lab. What we were telling them initially was that you certainly ought to identify anything that has a special use, like the president's office, a big auditorium, a chemistry lab, a student lounge, any, sort of what we probably should have said is identify every room, because sometimes the room name and the use code don't jibe. And so that's a pretty easy check there. So, all right. And so if we want to pick somebody else, go back to home, pick a campus. Anybody want to pick a campus? Let's pick Rome.
Go to Austin P. Oh, go ahead. I wanted to kind of check the campus codes because I don't recall seeing, and maybe they're there and I just didn't see them, the satellite campus code. Say ETSU has some other locations. Yep. Let's see what they've got.
Let's do this one and then we'll go look at that. Let's go to data entry, and it's border regions and it's Rhone State. And there's all their, Rhone State has a lot of them, and every one of them has the THEC code on it.
Okay.
So you go to the main campus, and then there's all the buildings. So Patty said, let's do Austin P. So we go to Austin P, and we do data entry, border regions, Austin P, and there's Fort Campbell, JA, and the main campus 14.
Okay, go to ETSU.
ETSU, home, ETSU, data entry. College of Medicine, the Kingsport Center, Kingsport Downtown Campus, main campus, and the Nave.
Go to MTSU because when I've been looking, I've only been seeing main campus, and I don't know if it's something I'm clicking or what.
MTSU only has a main campus.
There's no campus identifier for Horse Arena or airport.
Nope. They are all listed at your main campus. And part of the reason is, Patty, that all of the credits given at the airport are
Yeah.
logged at the main campus.
Okay.
And
That makes
that's
sense.
that's one of the distinctions. If
Okay.
there's certain criteria for satellite campus, and that's a THEC criteria.
Okay.
And unless you can get full credits at that location with an administrator there, you can't count the credits at the satellite campus. Let's go back and do Austin P. And let's do building edit checks at Austin P. And these are buildings that, again, as Art was pointing out, there are buildings, there's no name, there's no information, there's no gross square foot, there's no replacement cost. They're just missing. Then we can do room edit checks. And we see a lot of rooms that for some reason or another are probably, just as Art pointed out, we're lacking the use code. There's an area of 0. So it tells you which building it's in, what floor it's on, what room number it is, and we're missing area and we're missing room code. So again,
So is it, how does the program determine what needs to show here? Is it just select important fields like name, area, use code, and so on? I mean, are there just select ones? It can't be the whole thing because there's a whole lot of information missing in what we saw.
It's key information. I think in this case, if it's area and room use. See, none of these have an area or room use code. Now, like you say, Patty, there are other things, there are other faults that can happen. But,
okay.
I mean, this is a quick check, edit check. If we go to most campuses, like, as Art was pointing out, there'll be a few. One other thing, we can go to view building areas. And we'll stick with Austin P. And this one has the net area is the same as gross area. Net assignable area is the same as gross area. But the program flags that one as being out of whack. The net area can't be the same as the gross area. And here we have one with the net area that's greater than the gross area. Here's one where they're equal. So, just a quick look down there. I mean, we try to tell the campuses they need to do this. It's easy to do. It tells you what the building is and what the problem is. Governor's North Terrace, 51,000, and the gross is 41,000. That's hard to do.
I've got a question. So these numbers are generated out of the detailed assignments of the assignable areas and room use codes, right? I mean, these
Yes.
totals are generated out of the detailed room data that's filled out, correct?
Yes.
Because
yes.
the campuses think they know what the difference is between assignable and usable, and maybe we should say usable there, but I guarantee most of them do not. And but so that can't be an editable field, correct? You can't correct that by going in and editing that number. At least you shouldn't be able to.
No.
Okay. Yeah.
You've got to correct the net. And yes, it does here, whatever building this is, Maynard Science. Math and Science, which is a new building. They say it's 27,000 net, 24,000 gross, and net assignable is 16. Patty, those are pretty common terms. Those are, the FICA manual uses those terms: gross, net, and net assignable.
Right.
So then again, there's no revenue area in the science building. There's 4,000 square foot of classroom, 3,000 of lab, no open labs, no research, 6,000 square foot of office, 500 square foot of library, no phys ed. There's other of 10,000 square foot, and in this case, there's 0 of unclassified. So all of that information there is summed up each time. I mean, these numbers aren't held, they're calculated each time.
Each time you go into the detail. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So is there a legend for the colors?
Well, we have preached that for years, and I think it probably is in the instructions. But when you see red and you look and you see net area is larger than gross, that's pretty simple.
Yeah.
And
well, a legend would help for people like me who are looking at it going, okay, entirely what does that mean? So just a thought.
I think it probably is in the manual, Patty. But what we were telling campuses, and let's pick another camp. We'll pick MTSU. And we'll run that same thing, view buildings areas. And you don't see any. Oh, we got a couple. Off-campus warehouse, and Art mentioned this.
Yeah.
You know, you could come pretty close to gross and net, depending on how thin the sheet metal is. But there's a airport terminal. Is this a owned building or a leased building?
I'm not sure. They've got several out there.
And then for some reason we have there's, in whatever building that is, animal quarters, we have 7 areas that are unclassified. But out of all of the rooms, all of the buildings, we had what, 3 yellow flags?
Yeah.
And we have an excuse for at least 2 of them.
Yeah. So Art really pointed out those things that are pretty much already highlighted here in the database.
Yep.
Okay. Which is fine. It just means that we have that capability of doing it.
Yeah.
And going through it. Yeah. Okay.
And some of these, there were some edit checks that came from the old COBOL program too. So it looks at several things. So we've looked at.
Do you know if those things are in the instructions, or are those the kind of things that we need to verify with you and get in writing with you and Alan about what those are?
We'll have to see. I think most of that is in the manual, but we can check that.
Okay.
So we've looked at, and this in the guest, a lot of times if you start manipulating, it'll forget where it is. And so anytime you can always go back to home and pick a campus. So we'll pick middle again. We went through data entry. View buildings is really similar, except this lets you view all of the buildings with all of the information. So that's all of the information. And Patty, there's the Schedule D comments. And MTSU probably, Alan probably has cleared this because you guys had some Schedule D comments. And the sort order is just because there are 3 in the university section. But
so the other thing to check is whether or not in the course of reviewing the Schedule Ds, THEC is probably not, there's not a coordination of THEC's comments with these comments. That's my guess. In other words, they're doing them in the spreadsheets.
What Alan does though is if there's a change in the number, he does the THEC changes. If you look back at the previous schedule, they ought to coordinate with the final schedule that THEC did.
But that was from years ago because the SPAs would not have been, Alan would not have been picking up the SPAs that have severed.
I think he has.
We need to check that. Do you think he has?
I think he has.
How would he know that? How would he know that?
Because he's
not in that loop on the schedule.
He would call Stephen and have him send a schedule.
Okay. We know that's happened. I've just got a mental note to just verify the information is what I'm driving at.
See, there's Middle Tennessee from 12 through 19.
Right.
And I suspect that they are just like THEC. We need to check that, but so you can pick that, and that's exactly what Schedule D should look like from 2014. And all the headings are correct. And let's see if he picked up any of the comments. There's comments, but these are probably the campus comments. They're probably not THEC comments.
Probably not. So what I'm thinking about here is just the shift for the SPAs to be engaged in that process and just thinking through what is the process that we need, again, back to the idea of utilizing this as the primary driver for the Schedule D. That's what I'm thinking about.
See, I guess, I think this kind of came up about 2010 or 2011, but by 2012, we had it to the point where we were doing the Schedule Ds. And let me pick a smaller one.
Now, for the tech team, of course, obviously, none of this includes UT, anything for UT. Okay, which is what we need to pick up.
We can go to Dyersburg and click on Schedule D. And what I would do every year is do this. You export it to Excel. It exports it without the headings because THEC's spreadsheet has totals up at the top. And so we decided we're just going to use whatever THEC does. We will make sure that all of the columns work correctly. And what you do is export it to Excel, and what you get is Schedule D. And you simply copy and paste that, starting with, I think, where it is there. You copy all of this just like it is, copy and paste that into Schedule D. Now, what I would do every year is do exactly that, send it out to the campus and say, hey, is this what you want it to look like? Typically, they would say, well, no, you need to fix this. I'd say, no, you need to fix that in the PFI. Because what we wanted to do was to let them fix it in the PFI. And then, so the PFI would actually match Schedule D. So we tried to do that. So, and what I would do I would put all of the community colleges together, and I put all of the TCATs together. And so what used to be 40 separate spreadsheets were down to 2. And it's easy. You know, somebody mentioned institution, but THEC acquiesced years ago and gave us an additional column in there that we put the institution there, and it's pretty simple just to do subtotals on the institution, and you have all your subtotals. And when you paste it in, then the THEC has totals at the top. All right, let's see. So we looked at view buildings, and you can do rooms, you can view rooms, and that's just like, you know, this is Dyersburg, so this is easy. And select a building, and this one was a compromise in this for the key to enter. Instead of trying to generate all of that and pass it, you could export all of the rooms at that campus to Excel. For a community college, it really didn't make much difference, but for a university, there's a lot of rooms. By the way, there are, just on the universities, there are 990 buildings in there. In Excel, all 990 buildings are just 200K. So that's not a lot. Even when you put all the rooms together, all the rooms for the universities, the 6 LGIs are 62,600. And that is just under 6.6K. It's 6.5 megs. So, and I'm assuming it's not a lot different in the database. So we've talked about data entry. We're going to view buildings, view rooms, building edit checks, room edit checks, view building areas. That's what we did. That's where the colored things were. Schedule D summary, and Schedule D archives is the second tab, Patty. So
what is saved in the archives? Is it everything?
I'm sorry.
Or just the summary data? What is?
It's that.
What is saved?
All this.
It's all. So is it all the rooms as well? It's all the backup
No, it's Schedule
data?
D. There's no rooms in Schedule D. It's everything that's in Schedule D.
But Schedule D is generated out of the individual rooms. So is this basically numbers that are transported? It has to be the number value that's saved, and not the backup data that generates it. That's what I'm saying.
It's just Schedule D.
Okay.
Just Schedule D. And it's not the second sheet either. What I should have clicked on is that's archives. The Schedule D summary, what that does, Patty, is say for Dyersburg, they have 36,000 square foot of classrooms, 38,000 of scheduled labs, 21,000 open labs, no research, 43,000 office, library, phys ed, and recreation. We still have that the recreation lingers all the way through there. And I think we need to look at the numbers again, because the FICUM numbers may actually include some form of recreation. So we need to look at that. I think Jolene thought that it was out, but we need to look at that. Okay.
Okay.
So, yeah, and this just closes out the facilities. So home, any campus you want to look at. We've looked at data entry, view buildings, view rooms, edit checks, room edit checks, building areas, Schedule D. Schedule D summary is tab 2, Patty.
Okay.
And Schedule D archives is the Schedule D from every year since 2012. Now we can look at, well, we'll check, let me go to who's got campuses. We'll go to East and let's look at enrollment. Allen has the institutional enrollment for 2019. He has not yet got any of the enrollment from the satellite campuses. But that's the struggle, Patty, is, you know, there's the THEC campus ID. There's the roll-up numbers that Allen got from somebody, probably THEC. But he couldn't get any of the satellite numbers for 2019. So we can look at institution square foot per FTE, square foot for my institution, and that does this graph. And so for the whole ETSU institution, there's 14,000, there's 14.33 square foot per FTE. That's that number right there. And
will this generate this evaluation according to each specific campus code?
Yes, it will.
How?
But you got to have the numbers in there, huh?
But you have to have the enrollment in there to do it.
Yeah, let's go back and let's see.
So this is what's been missing from the Capitol. This coordination.
We can look at Motlow enrollment and institution and campus. Yeah, we've got it for each of those. So it is there for community colleges. We're just missing it for universities. So yeah, we can look at campus square foot per FTE. And there's the Fayetteville campus, there's the main campus, there's McMinn, and there's Smyrna. There's their 4 campuses. So yes, Patty, it runs it for each campus. Interesting. You can, if you don't want to include phys ed, you can do that and it closes that out. Let's take out library, let's take out research. And so
wait, how are you doing that?
Just clicking on the things at the bottom.
You're like just clicking and unclicking?
That little bar that says research.
Okay. All right.
And it takes it out or put it back.
All right.
You know, community colleges shouldn't have any research. So you can take that out pretty easy. You may want to put library back in. So yeah, you could actually take everything out except office. Well, you can take everything out. So there is classrooms and offices. You put class labs back in, open labs, no research, office, and we'll include the library. So yes, Pat, that is based on having good numbers in there. That is a lot of information.
Yeah. Well, that pretty much does what we've been talking about.
Yep.
So it's got the codes in there and got to get the enrollment numbers jiving. And that's where we might talk about with our own THEC folks about doing those data entries for the enrollments by campus code that Allen has been doing. And they're the ones who are going to need to go in and do that probably on a regular basis. Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
So Alan's got the 2019 in there, I guess, for the TCATs and for the community colleges. Let's look at a THAC. Who's got, I think Crossville has some satellite camps. There's not a THAC number for satellite, for community, for TCATs. There's not a, but it does the same thing. It's got all the information for the TCATs. There's just one. Apparently there's just Crossville. But it does all of that. We can do that for universities. Let's do institution square foot, and we can select, I think it's lost its way. Let's go to ETSU, and we do institution square foot per FTE. So there's the total of ETSU. That includes all our satellite campuses. That's the total. That's the only one that's running right now because Alan doesn't have the individual campus numbers.
Okay. Was this the reference when you did these studies last year for the comparisons of the formula space? Did you use this data or what the campuses sent for those handy dandy charts? I
used really both.
Okay.
But, most of the charts that I did were based on the Schedule D data and what I could get out of PFI as far as just raw data. I would look at this to see if we were anywhere close.
Okay.
33 square foot. What is that? That's office.
Right.
33 square foot per FTE, and the total of classrooms and class labs are what, 25. And even if you add on the open labs, that's 30. So yeah, people don't, when we would have our facilities seminars, I'd ask people what % of their campus do they think is classroom? And they would always miss it because the % of classroom is like 4 to 8%. All right, so we've done, and then here's enrollment, Patty, and you'll see that the head count and FTE are just missing for all the satellite campuses. We've got the total, so that was all that Alan could get.
So here's another thing, Carl, that I'm not seeing, maybe it's here, and that is the FTE for the online coursework.
It's not here because it really doesn't, in theory, it doesn't enter into facilities. Because if you have a lot of online coursework, the only impact on your main campus is space for the servers and space for the faculty and other support. So it's
yeah, but what I'm saying is that the THAC formula excludes the online, as you are saying, excludes the online FTEs, and therefore the comparisons need to be based on the on-campus enrollment, and these numbers are very likely include the online enrollment.
Yeah, it's whatever Alan could get. See,
So as a fundamental thing, though, in order to get our numbers consistent across the board, we need to address this in this database. If we're going to go to the trouble to get campus numbers and campus enrollment and campus FTEs and head count, we need a category for the online coursework, because I'll tell you, looking at those numbers is very revealing. Some have very high online numbers. Some have very low. UT's is in the not the thousands, but the hundreds. I was stunned looking at UT's online coursework. I'm not even sure that's correct. But that has got to be corrected and entered into this to begin to get close to having apples to apples comparison.
Yes. And again, TBR used to do that, because I can send you over a period of 10 years the change in head count on campus, and I'm sorry, FTE on campus and FTE online. And so I actually track those.
Well, it needs, for those bar charts to be correct, we need a field for online and that number removed from the FTE count for each specific campus code.
Yeah.
I would put that among the top of my list of things to change in the program.
Well, actually, only on ground should be reported.
Well, yes, but to get a semblance of, I mean, that's fine if it's clear there, but when you're looking at all the numbers for the overall FTE number, for it to jive with what THEC has and for them to fully be able to extract it, I think having it all there, but as long as the FTE is defined as only on campus and you're showing the online as separate, some people, now see, this is going to be interesting, some people have a space assignment by formula for accommodating the space needed for IT for the online coursework, because staffing and all manner of things need to happen. But that's a separate subject completely. All I'm saying is it needs to be the correct number, and they need to understand what the definition of that number that's going in there.
Yeah.
And we need to be able to cross-check it. In fact, we might even be the ones who put it in here.
Yeah, well, we will have to be from now on. We'll be. But again, TBR had a good handle on campus, off campus, and online. And in some campuses, like I believe at Roan, they credited online online classes to each satellite campus separately. So, you know, you had for each campus, including the satellites, you had what I call butts and chairs, you know, the head count on campus, the FTE on campus, and the online associated with that campus.
Right. Well, and that kind of gets to these quote unquote hybrid courses where they'll meet once at the beginning of the year and once at the end of the year, and it's called a hybrid, and they can count it for on campus, and that kind of stuff we've got to clean up.
Yeah. Yep.
I mean, and I would vote, you know, if you're only meeting once or twice in a semester and the rest of it is online, it's an online course.
Yeah.
You know, if you got to slice it somehow to make it simple.
George Malo was working on that. I mean, that was one of his sort of pet peeves was you know, and then when you would run the cost study, the utilization for some room would be really very low, and that's because it was only occupied for, you know, once a month. Okay. A couple of things. Patty, here's some of them. Here's the reference tables. Here's the CIP codes.
All right.
And there's a bunch of those. And these are drop downs. And the reason that I think the reason that Alan says it's going to take a little bit of time to do the department and division is that they need to create a table, and it needs to be the drop down code so you don't allow misspelling or anything. So when you sort on that, you're getting everybody. So it's like you said, it's nothing difficult, but there needs to be a table on both ends that that controls what can be in there. Reference table, here's the program classifications. See, you get into institutes and research, organized research, ancillary support.
Now tell me again, the source of this, what is the source of this program classification code?
It's left over from COBOL. It was a key part of the COBOL. It was a key part really of the cost study.
Okay. So this was generated by TBR or the state? It's not a standardized reference?
No, it's not.
Okay. Sorry, I've got chainsaws outside, you all. Can you hear that? I'm so sorry.
No, I can't.
Okay. They're just going to town.
No.
And the program classification and also room use codes. And these are actually the drop down. We probably ought to have all of the drop down tables in here.
Right.
But it goes clear on to the 300s. 300s include fuel storage, energy management, parking lots, parking meters, any sort of element on campus. There's cemeteries.
Wonderful. Do they have the bone farm? Is that what that is? I guess so. Think about UT.
Yeah, probably so.
Wow.
Most everybody is in the 100s and 200s. There's an occasional 300 in there, but not many. So in the 200s, there are public quarters, stairways, custodial, public restrooms, mechanical, and shafts, utility space. Structural area was a part of the old COBOL. There's parts of that are still in Arquebus, and we didn't ever get to that point. So I think that's it for the inventory. We've got we did data entry, view buildings, view rooms, edit checks, view building areas. That's a handy one because that rolls up all of the classroom, class lab, office. That's the main one that runs behind the graphs that are shown. There's Schedule D summary in the archives, and then institution and campus square foot, and then enrollment and reference tables. That's all of the elements really of the inventory.
Yeah, Carl, I have a question, and this is basically about navigating, and maybe it's just because of my relative lack of familiarity with it, but I found myself having to go home to pick institution to navigate between the menus.
Yes.
And which is frustrating, and maybe I'm not using it right, but I found that to be a bit laborious.
Well, Alan told me why that was, but basically is Yes, if you pick a campus and you start to do a lot of manipulation, it'll forget where it is. And so you've got to go
And
back and refresh it. The
that's a problem. I don't know if it can be fixed, but to me, that's a problem because most people are only going to be in one place, and it takes a lot of time to go back and forth and then start learning where you are. It doesn't say what you were looking at, and
well,
that you
usually
can't
what
stay in your
happens,
own institution.
yeah, usually what happens is you get no data. But again, that's on the view thing. We I don't think we had many complaints about that. Again, when you log in with edit rights, you are at your campus. And so there's no confusion.
Yeah, but
And
for all the rest of us looking at it, it's laborious. I think it's a problem that you can't. It's a navigation hiccup.
well,
That it's a challenge.
we hopefully at THEC, we will be just like TBR was with a higher level of access, which was not a problem. You could pick out a group of campus, an individual campus, or a group of campus, or all of a group, all the community colleges. Once you pick that in the with the full edit rights and everything else, then you were there. That was not a problem. So it may be some issue that can be fixed. All right. Do we want to talk about survey?
Sure. Everybody need a break? 5-minute break?
Do we
Whatever you
still
guys
have
think.
everybody here?
I'm sorry. Let's take a 5 or 10 minute break.
Okay.
Okay.
All right, we'll do it. I'm not going to hang up. I'm not going to cut you off.
Okay.
I should be here. If the chainsaws don't come get me. Carl, while I'm thinking about it, if you can send me your summary of your time
Okay.
today, that would be helpful. Thank you.
And it's just regular hours, huh? That's the category.
Right, just like, yeah, it's just like you've done it before. You've just done kind of an hour and task.
Okay.
You know, so that it corresponds to, because you still have to go into Edison and enter
Yeah.
the hours. Yeah.
Okay. I can do
Thank you.
that.
All right.
Are you seeing my screen?
Yes, I am. Mm-hmm.
This is on the TBR website, but this was my magic sheet from 2012, or remnants of it anyway. But here is there's the THEC code for the institution, which is always the main campus. So there's the THEC code for site code for all of the campuses until you get to the TCATs, and they don't have site codes. But there is site codes. Now that they're a college, I wonder if we need to rethink that, or somebody does, because they're getting college credits.
I'm sorry, you're saying where at the community colleges?
That the TCATs.
The TCATs.
The
Okay.
TCATs are now colleges.
Okay.
So I wonder, and the TCATs are giving college credit. So I wonder if we need to do a site code for TCATs. And if you look at them, some of the TCATs have satellite campuses, and we have more now than we did in 2012.
Right.
But in any case, there's a THEC number, there's an SBC number, there was a sort order, and those are owned and leased. Main campus owned and leased are the codes. But I think a key line here is THEC site code. And we ought to be able to do enrollment based on the THEC site code. I mean, TBR
Right.
code. Okay, and so there's of course, it ended in 2012. There's the space use code that we all know and love. Some people have asked why we use the full-fledged code in the drop-down code. And we did that just because they got sort of squirrely here. I mean, there's a lot of information here, and we started to get into Y's and X's and W's and all that sort of stuff, when the 2 series makes a lot more sense. So if we're going to track space, we decided we ought to, what everybody knows and loves are the 100s, 200s, and 300s. And then here was our first attempt at room subuse code, Patty. And
Okay.
administrating this was the subuse category. And what these are pretty much, there's the THEC space guidelines categories right out of the space guidelines. So we took that and tried to separate them out into administrative and instructional. And the thing probably wrong with this is that it gets at a too detailed level. And if you really want to do that, that's fine, but I'm not sure there's much
Right.
difference between a staff and a clerical and, and a vice president and an assistant vice president. So, maybe that's too much. It might be good.
Oh, go ahead.
It might be good to know the deans and then faculty and then professional. So we may be, and then sometimes you want to know if it's clerical or graduate assistants. So, how much this is broken down, how many categories, but at least this was the attempt in 2010 or 11. It was, it's 2012 date on it.
I'm just thinking out loud, and I could be convinced to change my mind about it. And this is great that it's available for anyone to use it if they want to. But I think probably the vast majority have not, and if they have not, they will not. And so we may. I'm kind of on board with the idea of having faculty and everybody else. Just faculty offices. And knowing what those are. Now, the advantage to entering all this in is that you get a better measure of where you have excess space or shortage of space by category, and you can identify what the issue is. So keeping them there, if somebody wanted to do that study and evaluate it, but I don't think they ever will, Carl. They don't have time to do those kind of studies. But now. The formula, though, of course, is based on this. But if you want to make any sense of it, you at least need to know where your faculty are, how much that is.
Yeah.
I think that was kind of what we got out of our conversations with the SPAs, is that they thought it would be a good idea to track faculty. I got a little bit of that.
Yeah. And and remembering back at 2012, I think a lot of them were going to just do the 50. It was going to be 12 and 50, or 14 and 50, or 20 and 50.
Right.
They were just going to do the big lumps. And the reason that most of them haven't done anything is because of the preliminary. They said, well, if it's preliminary, that means it may change, so I'm not going to do it. There was an early version of the CIP codes. There's program. And there's a further sort of allocation of space in the program. So because you can go in and sort out all of the student services, institutional support. And I think most everybody has done this because this was left over from the old COBOL, and they were trained to do this because this was required on those that have been around. So anybody that's been around for a while was familiar with this program classification. But that lets you take a broad look at all instruction, at research, public service. So those may be categories that we want to look at, Patty. I don't know. Then in furnishings.
That is one. Just thinking out loud. There's not a report for this, for an internal look, is there?
There's not a report for most of this, because most of the stuff that we did at TBR we would download into Excel because we didn't seem to do the same thing over and over. We were always looking at a different slice. So we just didn't.
This is one from a campus perspective. I'm just imagining would be very useful information, just in terms of a comparison. If you had some way of running a report from year to year about increase or decrease in these various areas, might be a useful thing.
Might be.
At a BP level, you know, some kind of historical data that shows a reference there might be a beneficial thing. Because then you're not hooked to the departmental listings. The other way to do it would be department, but this is probably the better way to look at it.
This is a little broader look at departments because we get into to student services, you know, and otherwise we don't really there's no way to get a handle on student services. So, and again, it was in the COBOL system. TBR ran reports and they would send to the president or the vice president and say, here's what your campus is looking like and here's a comparative.
Yeah.
So they did use it. And then furnishings, also preliminary, but we were just trying to say, okay, what sort of things do we have? We've got rooms that there's nothing in. Then we've got tablet arms, chairs, and then we got tablet arms that are fixed. And then we've got fixed lecture hall, and then seminar tables and chairs. That's really as far as we got because the other sort of learning types were just kind of coming on board. And but this would be helpful, I think, to campuses of, again, you could take a look at this, and if you've got predominantly seminars, you've got to use a higher square foot per FTE than if you have fixed seating or even tablet arms.
Right. This would be one I'd love for Art to take a look at and say, you know, this is a start. Here's the idea. What are the categories that we might need here? And then have that conversation about lab versus classroom discussion.
And we could even throw in the third part of the, you know, the sort of the new form. What do we call it?
What, the interactive learning? Yeah,
any of those names. But that needs to be, because those setups are really different than seminar.
Right.
And again, if it's only furnishings, it can change pretty rapidly. But if you've got either the seminars or the various special learning types, that means the room is fairly flexible. And then kind of the same thing for technology. We had preliminary, but you know, we've got just a classroom. There's no technology in there. And then we've got the projector, the sound system, and document camera. I'm not sure. Document cameras have kind of gone by the wayside, haven't they?
Well, there's some that have gotten so high end that you can have a ceiling mounted camera and they could do microscopic projections up onto the screen. So they're next level. It's not that they've gone away. They're next level now.
And then we had all of that. And then like MTSU, you've got a central management system.
Right.
So whether it's worth identifying or not, but that was what that was, is the fully developed classroom with a management system overall. Then distant learning facilities, that was a big deal, and it was fading in 2012. But we still have a few distance learning facilities that are super special rooms with several cameras and various projectors, but more often than not now they're just it's a WebEx or something like that.
Yeah, I'd like to hear from the campuses on that one, because that was at one point very specialized, and now it's pretty much all of them, I'm guessing.
Yeah. And then another one that was fairly common is just a computer equipped classroom or lab. And if we start to bridge the gap there, if there's computers in there, Art would say it's a lab. Because
Except that everybody has their computers with them.
Yeah.
Except there's a computer for every single person in the room.
So, and then we had the sort of the special purpose. You always have the outliers.
Right. Right.
So, and this was just to kind of acknowledge it is, it's off the charts. It's a special purpose, and they've got a lot of equipment in there.
And so were those codes that you assigned?
Again, these were preliminaries, and these were codes that came out of discussions with a few of probably the Tony Poteets. And again, we never did sort of gel on these, but that's why nobody has really done them, is because we said preliminary. I think everybody to some degree kind of liked the idea of having a little bit of handle on the furnishings and on the technology. Whether it's worth going to this extent or not, I don't know, but I do think those are categories that are probably worth considering.
Yeah. All right. So would you mind sharing this with all of us? We may have it somewhere.
I can do that. Yeah, I just downloaded it off of the TBR website, but I will do that.
Okay. So that spreadsheet is in the PFIS?
Right, I'm on right here's the TBR website.
Okay.
And the PFIS documentation.
Okay.
PFIS codes is that Excel spreadsheet that I just showed you. And the PFIS documentation, I downloaded it. Let's see if I can find it. I'll just download it again. Oh, here it is. There it is.
I've got that one in there. Yeah, I've got that one. That's posted on our website, I think.
But there's the general
maybe not.
information.
I've got it though.
I don't think it's posted. But here's talks about navigation, view buildings, view rooms. There's the edit checks, room checks, view buildings. So there's a short description of all of that, and then it's into the surveys and the ratings for the surveys. There's the institutional table, Patty, that we're not seeing here. And it's it's the high level. It's the institutional code. It's the SBC the SBC code, THEC code, an acronym, institution name, physical address, mailing address, all the other stuff. Then notes and coordinators. We were trying to say that, one of the coordinators needed to be for the inventory and one for the survey. And there's the institutional full-time equivalent, head count, import status, and enrollment. And then we had
we do have that guideline posted online. It's posted on the THEC website. Mm-hmm.
Okay. And then in the campus table, And again, I started to compare this campus table with the data entry, because the campus, we know what campus it is, and so you don't enter your campus, and then we're to the floor table, and then the room table, and then surveys. All right, we want to take a look at the surveys?
Yeah.
Okay, so let's pick Middle Tennessee again. Our guinea pig was always the Courtesy Old Main. So the navigation is the same. There's Middle Tennessee. You click on that, you get all of the campuses. In Middle's case, it's only one. And so then you have all of the buildings by number. And the THEC code for Middle Tennessee is 24. So if we now look at Courtesy Old Main, we get the key information. And some of this comes from the survey and some of it comes from the inventory. And I don't remember. I think all of this information comes from the survey, probably the address too. So once you know the building ID, you go back to look at the inventory and fill in all of the rest of that data. So
Let me ask a question. Can you edit this and have it changed then in the survey information? Are they cross-editable? In other words, you can edit one and then it goes into the other and vice versa?
Yes. I think all of this information comes from the inventory.
Okay. But you can change it here and it'll enter into the inventory.
No, you can't change it here. This is just display data.
Okay.
So I don't know if you can change any of this here because it's based on the inventory.
All right.
So 1911. Ooh, so it's 109 years old. That's even older. That's even older than I am, Patty.
It's older than we are, Carl.
And MTSU has done a pretty good job of indicating when they have done the survey. 2006, the survey started in 2002. 2006 was when we got FEA to come in there and do the validation survey.
Right.
And so that's Doug Yon and crew were the people from FEA that did that. So there's all the names and there's the date, and they did Linda and Brian did a survey apparently in 14, and in 15 Brian looked at the summer review, and in 16 they did it again, and in 18 they did something. So and then you can go to the next building and previous building, but then the building summary is where we are. Building rating system, and here was the roll-up sheet, and this is simply an emulation of what we did in Excel, but there's the campus rating, there's a weighted number in there. The more complicated and expensive the system is, the more the weighting is. Obviously, HVAC is high, roofing is fairly high, foundation and basement, and superstructure. Electrical is up there. These were approximate of a weighted average of what the building was costing. There's some down here that are not building cost items. Special construction is sort of dubious, but then site conditions, safety standards, building suitability, and adaptability are not cost items. So those are just thrown in there. They're not worth a lot. Together they're what, 10%, but it does give us a clue. You know, probably suitability and adaptability are probably things that we ought to look at. They may not necessarily contribute to the score of the building. But anyway, then the campus would rate it, and we were saying it's never 67.3. It's either 60, 70, or 80. It's some round number because it's not that finite anyway. We talked about just having a 1 to 10, but we ended up at a percentage. So the review score then was the same as the campus score. There's a 90 and 80. You don't worry much about the 10%. If they're 10% off, you say that's fine. But there's 8% total in there. So you go back and see where we're off. There's 100% and a 30%. So you say, whoa, that's something's wrong there. There's a 70 and 100. And you say, we need to look at that one. So what we would do is only look at the ones where the validation score was more than 10% difference. Here is the score from every year from 08, his first year that Alan started categorizing the scores, but it started at 69, it went to 71, then 70, and back to 68 again. And
Carl, how
yes.
are these? It all looks like it happens beginning of the fiscal year.
Yes.
Does he have an automatic program that freezes all these scores, or does he go in and manually capture them?
He goes in and captures them. He just actually runs a report that captures the score. And it's only the summary score. We haven't, this doesn't capture the individual scores.
Okay. That is, for the IT team, it's something that we want to keep and have the capability of maintaining a history of just at least the summary scores.
Yeah.
And be doing that. And this one, just of note, that this is the area where, and Paul and I in our discussions with the SPAs, just the initial discussions, this is the area where I think there may be the greatest changes. And this is going to require some research on our part to determine how we proceed with these categories. So there may be things like the CSI categories I think are good. The way that the numbering system works has been something we've talked about. We've talked about perhaps the need to have, in addition to buildings, have some infrastructure components here that can be captured, even if it's just from a broad perspective. So that's a whole project in and of itself, identifying how to capture conditions of infrastructure systems on the campus.
But
so
I do
anyway,
think that
that's just of note. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, I just think that without doing that, we're not answering the question that we've really been asked to answer over the long term, which is what is this big deferred maintenance number and all this stuff? Because, I mean, Carl, I don't know. I'm very interested to hear your thoughts on this. Because infrastructure it's that hidden thing that nobody thinks about until it goes wrong.
Way back when we first started doing the, I want to call it the ICLAY formula, it's the Sherman-Durgis formula. What I would do is I had 3 or 4 categories in there, and if it was on the main campus and had was depending on all of the site utilities, You know, they had a central boiler and chiller and all of that. And I would add 25% for infrastructure. If it was a farm building, it had no infrastructure added. And so for the ones in between, I had, you know, either one or two categories in the middle that it had some of the central utilities, but not all. So we tried to capture that, Paul, in just numbers like that. Is,
Right.
you know, if you've got a central campus and all central utilities, that's a big deal. If you've got a farmhouse sitting out there, you know, the utilities really are just kind of insignificant.
Mm-hmm.
So we were trying to capture it like that, but it got pretty complex, and then it was driving the scores up higher than we really wanted them to be. So we abandoned that. But I did have a category that showed for each building, whether it was central campus, all utilities, some central utilities, or no central utilities. But that's a good point, Paul.
Well, I think it's just it's what it's a new iteration, and I think a lot of the campuses are going to be interested to see what that functionality and how to track that, as long as it's done in a way that
Yeah.
doesn't become so onerous or impossible to keep track of.
You know, and I still think my concept had some logic to it. Is it all on central utilities? Is part of it on central utilities or none of it?
Mm-hmm.
So, and here's again, CSI. This is either level 1 or level 2 of CSI down to, I think, there. And then the rest of these are out of the categories. CSI categories or would be in the G or the X categories. But these were the main categories. Each one of these was a tab in my spreadsheet, and so they are a separate element here. And it's pretty much what our high-priced Atlanta guy suggested of the ones of CSI. We did have arguments or discussions about safety standards. Should that be somewhere up here? And probably it should. You've got safety standards with fire protection. You've got safety standards with the stairs. And so is that duplication? That was a question that was raised. And then site conditions, that's a little bit kind of, Paul, where you're suggesting, and what does site conditions mean? And we were kind of saying that's maybe 5 foot outside the building, the old architectural thing. It's the stairs, it's the access to the building, it's the service entrance of the utilities.
Right.
So then we started, and this is pretty much the typical format, is here's the system, and this is based on the 3 or 4 community colleges that had a survey done. They generally followed this format. And of course, this was 15 years ago, 20 years ago now, I guess. Because we put this together, it really started in 2002. The Mike Fitz SBC was either 1999 or 2000. And so we discussed it for at least a year. So here's the description, and there's FEA. So this was in 2006. They said they concur, and the idea was that this is fixed. It's an exterior columns and it's foundation walls and it's interior footings, and that's not going to change. What changes is the areaways are cracking, the handrails, and those kind of things, and the recommendations. And all FEA said was concur. And sometimes FEAs was pretty light duty, just say, yep, that's what's there. Then these are further description, further breakdowns under the uniformat. These are the third level generally in the uniformat. Are there cracked walls? Is there sediment deterioration and drainage? And it's from unsatisfactory to satisfactory. So it's from 1 to 5, or from satisfactory 2, 3, 4, and unsatisfactory. And then, going on down. Then so standing water, this is where you need to look if you're trying to figure out what you need to do for your next project. And it ought to be clued by the rating. So if you got a 60% rating, you've got problems. And so you need to figure out what those problems are and how to address it. So the next one is basement construction. Everything is going to follow the same thing. You're going to have a value, a campus rating, the math, then review rating, and the math. So the campus rated it at 80. The review, whenever that was done several years ago, was at 90. And then again, the third level of the uniformat, and then recommendations. So all of that, and then we get to roofing. Roofing has a little more details in it. So here's the roofing, and here's 2019. We did something on it, and here is the roof warranty. All of this, Patty, this is information that the roof report spits out, but it's all entered here, and we can actually view the warranty. So there's the total roofing system warranty. It's a 30-year warranty, and it's Maxwell Roofing and etc. So this is one that Middle Tennessee has done. They put their name in there, and there's all the rest of the data, and then terms and conditions and signatures. So we can actually look at the warranty. Everything else there's nothing. That's the only one that has a special features in it. Then we go to attachments. And what MTSU has done is use attachments for there's an attachment. Let's see what that is. Mechanical scope of work. They looks like they changed the rating, and there's some more comments and a pretty detailed list of things to do. But MTSU has done a pretty good job of doing things like that, including things like that. They did early on, they were doing the Taft renovations, and some of these are PDFs, some of them are documents. It really doesn't make any difference. But there's some, with Taft funds, those are the rooms that they renovated. So, that's pretty flexible in that aspect. And again,
Carl, this is where you would store, if you wanted to store floor plans.
Yes.
You could do it here, or is there another place for those?
This is probably the best place right here. And then we've got projects. This is intended to be either building commission or in-house projects. And, 2001, there was a fire alarm project, and there's the SBC number, and it was I.C. Thomason. They haven't done the cost, but it really doesn't make any difference, because if you've got this clue, you know it's 09, 02, 97B, you can go back to PITS and actually look. So MTSU has done a pretty good job of tracking these kind of projects. So that is that's projects, and then we've got pictures.
Carl?
Yes.
This is the field for the SBC projects, where, you know, if there's any discussion about having some way when you archive a PITS project for it to be logged in, I don't know that it would be a link necessarily, but at least populate these fields. And the time when that should occur is when the project is archived from PITS.
Yes.
So for the IT team, you know, here's just sort of speculating. This is what Dick has talked about. Now, clearly, you can just manually enter it in, but you have to remember to do that. And guess when that happens? Almost never. I mean, you know, you have to. It's a discipline that, in the scope of things, is kind of tough. So finding some way to populate these fields that has some kind of reference to a specific building for those renovations would be, well, they're all ultimately going to have a building number except for infrastructure project. And there's another one, having a field with the infrastructure component that is logging in infrastructure projects here would be beneficial.
And there, in this case, there is really no, in PITS, there's no building ID. It may say Curtsy Old Main, and it may say KOM, but there's no building number in PITS.
Right. So I don't know if, you know, if there's a way to have a pop-up field or field that must be filled out that gets you to populating this somehow.
Yeah.
You know, data, you don't have to pull all of the data over. You just have to reference it, assuming that the data is always there in PITS. You can go over there, but having it in the survey, there's no other place where you can see the impact of renovations over time over a particular project, except here.
Yep.
So that's kind of not a shortcoming, but something to think about if there's a way to start doing that so it's more of an automatic function.
And this doesn't have to be an SBC project either. Here's one that's no SBC, and that's probably the original construction, John Charles Wheeler, 1963. Now, that was a renovation in 1963, I guess. But this can be, if the campus does a lot of renovations or, you know, improvements, they can be logged here. What MTSU has done is put their in-house projects mainly in attachments. And then we go to projects, which is where we were. Then we can go to pictures. Here's a listing of all of the pictures that are there. And we tell them this asterisk is the one that's going to show when you bring up the first building summary. That's the picture that's going to show. You can renumber the pictures if you want to, or you can put this asterisk on any picture in there. And you can actually view the gallery. You can view those pictures. And there is some description with each picture. These are ones the campus had done. I think, because that's my foot, I recognize those shoes. This was done in the FEA. These are FEA's pictures. And then in the summary, there's a description or a short description of what the issue is, what the problem is. Typically, other than the first 1 or 2, 3 pictures, it's to explain whatever you wrote down. Whatever you downrated, you could have a picture of and that's why you downrated it. Issue there is caulking. Issue there is handrails that don't go all the way down, that don't meet ADA, don't meet anything. Peeling paint, spalling. There's where the anchors, they used ferrous anchors and they rusted and expanded and popped the limestone.
Wow.
And there's rooftop unit, and there's the first picture. So that's kind of a quick overview of the. Let me close that. And then you can go previous building, next building, and down at the bottom, you can go to the previous section, next section. So you can be in electrical and go to next section, and it's your data. So, and then that's pretty much, each section has this same logic. It's system description, condition and recommendations, and then ratings. And this is the third level of the uniformat. And then we go to reports, and it's the campus score and review score. Export only, I'm not sure why that's export only, but what this does is, let me go to a, well, it's okay. We'll see how long this takes. Oh, let's go to MTSU and run the report. So here's the individual scores of all of the buildings. There's the campus score, and there's a review score, there's foundation. So it's both the review score and the campus score is a comparison. So you can go through and look at all of the systems. And again, what we were looking for is scores at 70 or below, and also if there was a distinct difference between the review score and the campus score. Also in reports, all of those are printable view. All of these really have to do with the score summary, and somewhere we can get the history. And interesting, let's go to Austin P, and we run the report at Austin P, and here it is from 2010. And if we look at a lot of the buildings, a lot of the buildings tend to be the same. There's some campuses are pretty much the same, which means they haven't, and I guess there's probably a building that just came on in 2015. But you can look at sort of the history or roof information. And this is what Patty brought up the other day. And we'll look at TTU. So there's the building ID, the name, the location of the roof, because it's, it's the flat part, it's the sloped part, it's all of it, it's the entire roof. The roof type, shingles or single membrane, the system manufacturer, the warranty end date, the area, when it was new, and again, the scan is whether or not the warranty is in there. So TTU's got a lot of them. They've got a lot of the warranties scanned into the database. So that's pretty much it for the survey. As far as data, probably the biggest single lump of data is probably the pictures. Because a lot of times the campuses would load a group of pictures and they would be, 2 megs each, and we're looking at that on screen. So what Alan would do, I don't know if he did this, he had some way he could do a batch, and he would look for any photograph that was over, say, 500 bits, and then rescan it or resave it down at like 150 or 200. So, he reduced all of those by like 90%. But we got pretty heavy just in pictures, just because people were loading large format pictures, which was unnecessary in this case. So, but other than that, there's, any of these surveys, the amount of information that's here, got to pick a building. There's what Wiser Patent looks like. And Patty, I think all of this information after the building ID, I think, comes directly from the inventory. So it only appears in the inventory. This is just a reference. It says,
All
yep,
right.
it's 41,000 square foot, built in 1932. Oh, well, that's a lot of words.
I have a question.
Okay.
So one of the things that came up in our conversations is that everybody feels like they're so short-staffed that they prefer to focus on doing regular surveys on E&G buildings only and not on auxiliary buildings.
Yeah.
And I have mixed feelings about that. I understand the dilemma. They, walk through the timeline. They got to do 20 buildings a year. If it's just the E&G buildings, then it'll take them 5 years to do it. So all that makes sense. But I'm not really comfortable with the idea of letting go of a regular visual of the auxiliary spaces and knowing what's there.
Yeah.
And there's a discipline there too. I don't think the state would look kindly on the knowledge that they were not being reviewed for assessments. So in the back of my mind, I'm wondering, is there some kind of assessment light that can be done? I don't know. I'm just kind of throwing that out there because I'm kind of with them in terms of the discipline of getting out there and doing it. Even for the campuses that have, strong staff, it's a challenge.
Yeah.
And you need to be doing more than just the buildings that are coming up for capital or consideration for capital.
What some campuses did was, and of course this is only universities, because, well, there's auxiliary buildings at community colleges, but not near to the level that it is at a university. But there was a couple of universities, Patty, that when they had a project in the dorms, they would get the whoever was the dorm people to kind of give them a quick overview. Now, it was not in depth. It's kind of like you were suggesting. It's a first look.
Yeah.
And that's probably good. I mean, you and I could walk through a dorm and put down some comments and a score in, what, an hour?
We could do a fair job and not be too far off.
In an hour. And it'd take another 20 minutes then to load that stuff in. So that's kind of, as you're suggesting, Patty, that's kind of a high level look. You don't necessarily, well, if you have a project, I think it was TTU, but they would look at the at the architect, particularly for mechanical and electrical.
Yeah.
So yes, I agree with you. Those don't deserve the attention that an E&G building does, because the
Right.
state is not funding those. But in most cases, well, in all cases, it is a state investment, even though it's
Yeah.
auxiliary. And if there was a bond fund or a bond loan on that, it is something that the state is responsible for ultimately
Yeah.
to pay for. So yes, there's reason to have at least some information on all buildings.
Yeah, and then this sort of brings up also the question about the formatting of the survey information that we're gathering. One of the things that we definitely want to do one way or the other for all of them is do our matrix, our facility condition and program suitability matrix.
Yeah.
Want to
Yeah.
do that for all of them. That's a very simple thing to add and will yield enormous information, I do believe, and can be the generator for our deferred maintenance number. But that said, it brings to mind this idea with the ASTM E2018 that those scores that are in there on a 100-point scale may be able to be instead the sort of levels. And those scores represent the levels anyway. It's just a different way of thinking about it. And I guess it's my thought about it, but it puts some words to the meaning of what you're defining there. And I guess, and part of that means, so those scores could ultimately generate a grade, ABCD overall grade that can be generated that would automatically generate part of that matrix. And thereby, if you tie it to the replacement value, can generate a deferred, maintenance number. So I think that could be a way, not to simplify, but to modify. And I'm a little reluctant to discard sort of the systems approach, but the whole review is still a systems approach. We'll have to see how much of that we retain. I like the idea of retaining the CSI categories just at the levels that you have. And in fact, I think that's the way the ASTM E2018 captures it. But that's where we're going with this, is some not a transfer, but a shift that can help build on the meaning of this information.
Yeah. See, and I think we could, I think you can throw away everything below 50 or maybe even below 60. Because if the score is 60, that's failing, so it doesn't make any difference whether it's 40 or 60. So, we may want to focus a little more on just limiting it, from 60 to 100 would help, I think.
Right.
That's, that if it's below 60, then it really doesn't make any difference. It's a failure.
It's kind of an ABCD, is what it is.
And as far as scoring, the site conditions probably shouldn't be in there. It's even questionable whether special construction should be in there. And equipment furnishings, those are all, the equipment and furnishings sort of go along with suitability. So adaptability and suitability probably are not scoring items. We need that information, but they don't need to be scored as a part of the building.
Yeah, you're right.
That's a separate
and have some way of eliminate all the hundreds, because that skews everything. So right now, there are just enough anomalies in there to skew what you otherwise could roll up to the numbers that can generate the numbers.
Yeah. And even the hundreds, Patty, if it's an old building or not a real old building, let's say it's 20 years old, and you're rating the mechanical system, there's no obvious problems with the mechanical system, but it is 20 years old. And maybe 30 years is the life expectancy of the mechanical system. So do you
Yeah.
start to downrate that? Because you're significantly into the life cycle of the building.
Now, see, what you're talking about there is exactly what some of these proprietary programs capture. And
Yeah.
that is the lifespan, expected lifespan of all manner of the CSI categories that then translate. That's how they translate it into deferred maintenance, because they're capturing the expected lifespan on the systems. And I don't know if we're going to get into that, but it is worth noting, if you want to get to some point where this information can be extracted to begin to set priorities for capital maintenance, then it's a pretty simple thing, I think, to capture that as a checkbox or a number as a lifespan for those things to come up in priorities.
And
that's what those programs do.
Yeah. And a roof is a good example. If you've got a 30-year warranty on a roof, it's not going to fail on year 30. So you can't rate it 0 on year 25, but it's somewhere along. I mean, if you're 25 years into a 30-year warranty, what's the rating? You know, so that is a challenge.
Right.
But it was, again, when we started this in 2000, with Mike Fitz, Mike got really focused on it. David Johnson did an excellent job. I mean, he did yeoman's work on this. And then we got the high price consultant in, and we did a lot of looking for a software package, and there was really none at the time that seemed to meet this need. So it's amazing how, in 20 years, software packages are everywhere. You can Google software maintenance packages, and there's a bunch.
But the higher ed ones, they got smart. They're mostly proprietary that I know of.
Yeah. And there are reasons, because if you get started, we had a lot of nose-to-nose arguments with FEA, because they were pretty much determined they were going to use their software package. And we said, no.
No.
Said, well, that's not what we bid on. And we said, well, yes, actually it is, because you responded to our RFP and we were very clear in the RFP. So we did have some pretty hard discussions with FEA at the time.
Well.
And I am glad that we are not hooked into the FEA package.
We'd still be there.
It's kind of like Insight. It's a pretty complicated thing, and they do that. They make their own systems pretty complicated. So if it's inside baseball, it's pretty easy for them to operate, but it's really tough for a campus.
Yeah.
It's like Dyersburg trying to operate Archibus.
Right.
So I think I'm done.
Well,
again,
that was quite the tour.
I've probably missed some things, but again, I'm pretty familiar with this, and I've spent, and again, one of the reasons that there's not a lot of reports is that what I had Alan do was almost everything you can export to Excel. And once you get it into Excel, you can kind of do whatever you want. And it seemed that the questions I was asked or the things that I wanted to do were never the same. So we just didn't create many reports. The one Jim's talking about, I think, is a very logical report. But to do that, you've got to have the department and division. But that's pretty important.
Yeah, pretty important stuff.
And you'll notice that on the campuses that do have that, like TTU, it is from a drop-down table. And that's particularly Alan saying, you know, if you're going to write a report on it, you can't have typos.
No, and they would have to define what that drop down needs to be.
And each campus is going to be a little bit different.
Right.
You know, like even what Art said, you know, you have the arts and science, and sometimes it's just art, sometimes it's just science, but there's a difference. So it is probably going to be a separate table for each campus. Now the community colleges may have some similarities.
I'm writing. Okay. Yeah. So that's for the campus a little task to define what those would be, but it's not a complicated task. They should already know what they are. They might have to check with them, but that's their university structure.
Yes.
And it will change from time to time. There's the other thing, that they change regularly enough that it's a little project to keep up with.
And I noticed some of Ann's comments is that according to somebody, they're going to change it from one department to another department. So Ann has recorded all of the ones that, you know, that they've told her to change. Yeah.
Now, let me ask you a question. UT, I believe, has, when they come in with facility scores, don't they have basically the 100-point score that I've heard that they have? But I don't know that much about the way they do their surveys.
What UT did was they initially asked us for the spreadsheet that we use, and so we sent them that. And then they decided they wanted to go ahead and use the program, the survey program that we had. So Alan packaged all of that up and worked with them for a while to get that up and running. Then they decided they weren't going to use that. So they have used, as far as I know, they're still using pretty much the spreadsheet version. And so it's really the same thing in a spreadsheet format.
Well, of course, they're heading off now with their own survey, and it's going to be, again, a proprietary format for the program. Whether or not they intend to use that program or not, I haven't talked to them about that particular item, but it's going to be produced, I believe, in a different format from that. It's going to be that ASTME 2018 format that they're going to be using. And that's how they're going to be generating all of their reports.
So kind of two things is, you know, you may want to see if THEC could get access to their reports, or there's a simple extraction. If they're using basically the uniformat, maybe we can extract the summary score into simply a score here, where we may not have say a level, but we would have their score. So some combination of I think the important thing is that THEC should be able to validate whatever they're getting, whatever they've seen in.
So ideally, we'll all be working off the same format. This is the goal. I don't know if we're going to get there or not, but definitely they should be moving data into the inventory information on a regular basis. There should be no reason why they can't do that.
Right.
And in the survey, that we have enough in the way of conformity or standardization with regard to the scores and even the matrix data, that we have enough of that bones, I'll call it, of the survey outcomes that they have that can be logically retained. So that would be the goal.
If they could extract and import even the basic information for the inventory, then THEC could run Schedule D directly out of the PFI.
Right, for everything.
For everything.
Right.
Everything. And again, it kind of maybe a two-step process. What I used to do is extract Schedule D and send it to the campus and say, here's what it looked like. Are you okay with that? And
Right.
typically they would say, oh, no, we need to, you know, that's a way that we
Right.
got them to pay attention to updating. So, and Alan would track the utilization. So before Schedule D was due, there was usually a pretty good volume. In fact, we were concerned about how many users we could get on at one time, since
Uh-huh.
TVR had like 45 campuses. So obviously we couldn't have 45 users at the same time. So, but we never ran into a problem.
Hmm.
That was a problem we worried about that never occurred.
Never occurred. Well, it's kind of like life, you know. You were at some point realize you might have been worrying about the wrong thing. All right. Anybody have any comments, questions? See if Ashali and Deepraj are still on. Paul's still on.
No, it's
Yes,
lost
we do.
again. It was
Carl.
good.
Yeah, thank you, Carl, so much for going over. We got a very good idea about what data is there on this website. And yeah, as we look into it more, now we have the guest login credentials, so we'll look into it and see. We'll play around.
And this will give, I think, enough of a first overview that conversations with Dick and Alan maybe can make a little more sense.
For sure, yeah. You gave a very good overall understanding, and you went through each and every field, so that was really helpful. I don't remember how much I'll remember, but it was still pretty clear. And Patty, whenever you get a chance, it will take some time, but once the recording is up, if you can share it with us. Kartika didn't join, so we'll share it with her also, and it will be good for our reference also, so we can go back and hear when we have time.
Definitely. Will do.
Yeah.
And again,
Yeah.
this spreadsheet is on the TBR website. And a big deal here, Patty, I think, is the THEC site code.
Yeah.
And then making sure that the enrollment is in accordance with those site code and on ground and online. And all right.
Super
Carl, the
duper.
more you go over the stuff, we feel like we should steal your brain. You know how much, you know so much. You have very good experience on everything, and you have detailed knowledge. We don't know if we'll ever learn how much you know, but we'll try at least to keep it running.
Just thinking back, this was kind of the first time that a listing had been put on one sheet of all of the main campuses and all of the satellite campuses. And so this kind of became a big deal at the time. And then out of this, we developed that map. You remember the map, Patty?
Yeah.
Huh?
Yes. Uh-huh.
Yeah. So there's a question mark. The Dixon County Higher Education, that was in the space bubble. It's called the Renaissance Center. That's the Renaissance Center. And they kept trying to give it to us. And finally, we said, no, no, no. So I guess THEC may have, at least in 2012, THEC did not have a site code. Oh, they did have, there's the Renaissance Center. I don't remember what that one was. That was something that probably a special purpose thing.
So we can go ahead and be confirming these now. I mean, we can just go ahead and get started on this.
And we may have to look back and see if we've added any campuses. And Patty, you need to decide if the 50 number makes sense or not. Because if you look at all of the sites that Volunteer State has that had teachers at or taught at, it was 2 pages. You know, there's probably 50, but it was, you know, then 15 or 20 were high schools and they had enrollment of 6 or 9 or 3, and they had some community centers and they had enrollment of, you know, 12 or 15. So, and then that's why when you total all of the satellite campuses, FTE, it didn't always equal the institution total.
Right.
Because we had FTEs that were at satellite campuses that we were not included. So the full institution FTE didn't correlate with
Different. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. We might need to have some kind of designation like major and minor. But, you know.
Well, we didn't even include those. I mean, like for Vol State, it was close to 50 satellite campuses.
Yeah.
You know, and so we just, you know, couldn't track those. A lot of them were like in the high school, there was just a use agreement. There wasn't even a lease. There was a use agreement.
You know, it makes me wonder if it's you know, under 20 students and it's a lease, or, you know, the consideration of the lease facilities, maybe it's not really a campus.
Yeah.
You might have some leases where you get up to more numbers and might want to include those. But yeah, what do you think a good cutoff number is? What was the number you said you used?
50.
20?
We used 50.
50, really?
50.
Okay.
I'll send you, I've got some older, it's probably 15 or 16, but let me send you that of all of the satellite campuses. And there's a lot in there, but they're all small numbers.
Yeah. Okay.
And they change. Sometimes they change every year.
Well, they will. But you wouldn't expect the major campuses to change every year necessarily.
No. That's why we hit on the number of 50.
Okay.
See, the Southeast Center is now a satellite campus, and it's owned. The Cookeville campus still belongs to Nashville State. So that's the same. Gray campus is pretty much, you know, it's pretty much gone. All right.
All right.
Well, if anybody has any questions, let me know, because I've spent a fair amount of time with all of this, so I've got a little bit of history.
A little bit of history.
Yeah, I may have to walk through the recording of this again before I fully formulate any questions.
Well, Carl, we certainly appreciate your time and all your knowledge and expertise and ideas, and we'll be jumping into all this.
Absolutely, this was great.
Do I need to send anybody anything?
Money.
Okay, how much?
Whatever you think is fair for a Friday morning.
That sounds right. So today I'll try to get in touch with Dick and about setting up a time to talk with him and Alan. And we've talked a couple of times about it, so he'll know what's going on. So we'll get it going.
Great stuff.
Okay.
Okie dokie, guys.
See you, everybody.
Have a great Friday.
Fun time was had by all.
Thank you. You also have a good Friday.
Thank you, Carl.
Bye-bye.